everyone to the Buttercup podcast, where we talk about early childhood topics. Today, I'm so excited because my guest is Dr. Ann Anderson Berry. Thanks for being here today, Dr. Anderson Berry.
Thanks for having me. It's a great opportunity to chat about mentoring.
Yes, thank you so much. So I'm going to read your bio. And Dr. Ann Anderson Berry is a professor and vice chair of research of the Department of Pediatrics, and she's the executive director of the Child Health Research Institute at the University of Nebraska Medical Center. And she's the vice president of research at Children's Hospital and Medical Center. Additionally, she serves as division chief of neonatology and is the founding medical director of the Nebraska Perinatal Quality Improvement Collaborative, NPQIC. Her research activities include funded federal and state research grants, evaluating perinatal nutrition and the impact on maternal and fetal outcomes, and grants to better understand neonatal opioid withdrawal syndrome, NOWS. The impact of intrauterine opioid exposure on brain development, and the compounded impact of poor nutrition and social stressors on infants with intrauterine opioid exposure. She is a constant advocate for Nebraska families and understands the importance of recognizing rural and urban needs when allocating perinatal resources. As a mentor to multiple students at the undergraduate, medical student, and resident level, as well as the Ph.D. students she trains, she works to prepare trainees to do impactful and outstanding work in their chosen fields. Dr. Anderson Berry serves on national committees for the American Society of Nutrition, the Pediatric Academic Society, and the Association of Neonatologists. She completed her training at the University of Wyoming for undergraduate studies, Creighton University for her medical degree, her Pediatric Residency and PhD at the University of Nebraska Medical Center, and her fellowship in neonatology at the University of Utah. Dr. Anderson Berry loves spending time with her two daughters and husband in the mountains of Wyoming. Well, thank you so much for being here, and I'm so excited to talk to you about your work and mentoring. And that's how I got to meet you, is in 2021, you led the mentoring workshop at the University of Nebraska system. And so welcome and thank you. And I'm so excited to talk to you.
Well, thanks. Yeah, it's a great opportunity to be here. I really enjoy podcasts. I actually was listening to one while I grabbed a quick bite to eat before we sat down tonight. So I think they're a great way to get information out in a really conversational style. And it's just fun to be here talking with you. It's been great getting to know you over the years since that first opportunity to chat. So.
And how did you get started in your career? How did you
Yeah, so,
get to be a medical doctor and
yeah,
MD
I did.
and the PhD?
So I guess you could call it my origin story is a winding, curving one. Yeah, you mentioned my two daughters in my bio, and they're just towards the end of college for the older one, and at the end of high school for the younger one. And it's just interesting because I notice all the time people are asking, what are you going to do with your life? What's next? What do you want to be when you grow up? And what are you going to study in college? It's this constant peppering of questions. And it's almost to the point where I just want to say, hey, I don't even know what I want to do when I grow up and I'm 50. Let them have a breath. So when I was in high school, I loved science. When I was in grade school, I loved science. And so I always thought I would be a scientist. And I was particularly interested in genetics. It was in the 70s, very novel and exciting. There were lots of new discoveries happening all the time. And so I was always in the school science fair and worked hard to make sure I could get to the district competition and then to the state competition. And that was a really big source of inspiration to me to think of good projects that were hypothesis driven and would be fun to present in that venue. So I went to college at the University of Wyoming, and I majored in zoology and physiology because I heard there were lots of labs that would take undergraduate students for research. And so my second semester of my freshman year, I knocked on one of the professor's doors who was, I think, teaching my biology class. And he said, "You should go see Dr. Jones Smith Sonneborn." He was very gruff. And I went to see Dr. Jones Smith Sonneborn, who was this tiny little thing. If you knew me, I'm 6'1", so I'm very tall and Swedish. And she was this very, very petite, very energetic, dark hair, curly haired woman. And she was just alive around anything that had to do with science and discovery. And she worked and ran an aging lab, and she had research funding to do lots of interesting things around the genetics of aging. And she just enveloped me in the science of that lab. And I learned to isolate DNA and run Western blots and Northern blots, and really help in all aspects of her research. And then she helped me design my own research projects over the years. So I was with her in her lab for 3.5 years, and I worked for her in the summer. And we just had fun doing science. She gave interesting talks and wrote interesting papers and had grad students that were very, very sophisticated and opinionated, and sometimes a little bit off the wall. um, it was just a really fun environment. And I could have done that forever, but I also thought I wanted to live in the state of Wyoming forever. And University of Wyoming is the only four-year university there. And all the faculty were fantastic and young and engaged and doing great things. And they're like, "I don't think we're going to be hiring any faculty anytime soon." And so I said, "Well, I better diversify my skill set." And so I decided at the very last minute of my junior year to take the MCAT um, and apply to medical school so I could still do some science in medicine and be a doctor and practice in Wyoming. And so I did that, and I applied to medical school, and I interviewed at Creighton University, and it was just a great fit. The people there were so kind, and I got such a great education. Um, that I have absolutely no regrets about doing that. I toured Creighton on my medical school interview, and I can remember a couple of things about the day, and I think both are pertinent to this conversation. The first is that we got a tour of the hospital, and the only thing I can remember about that tour of the hospital is that I got to see the NICU, and I got to see all of these tiny babies in their little incubators, and the nurses that were so attentive. And I just thought that that looked like an amazing, really special place. If you would have asked me before that day, I don't think I could have told you what a NICU was or what a neonatologist was. And the second was who I got to eat lunch with. I got to eat lunch with an M4, which means a fourth year medical student. And that person was almost a doctor. And I thought that was amazing that someone who was almost a doctor would take the time to have lunch with me and tell me about his medical school experience. And so I think that that tells you that you always can have an impact on people who are coming up behind you. No matter how little you give, it can be really, really meaningful. And so when I talk to students, I talk a lot, almost every year, to the M1 and M2 students about my career and about opportunities for them in pediatrics and in science. And I make sure I tell them that story because the sense I get from them, even more and more over the last 5 years, is that they don't feel like they are valued, and they don't feel like they've accomplished anything, even though they've worked so hard to get where they are. And it's so competitive to get the slot that they got. And so many people would give anything to be where they are. And so it's a really, there's a little bit of dissonance in what they've done and how they feel about themselves. And so I try to reset that for those students, that they have done amazing things. And if they give back just a little bit, if they talk to undergraduate students or high school students, those students will be so inspired by what they've done so far in their story that it'll be incredibly helpful. Um, so anyway, I met at M4. Wow. And I toured a NICU. Wow. And I decided to go to Creighton, and it was amazing. And everyone was kind, and I got a great education. And, it was Midwest, feeling the love of all of that. And I applied to other places where I did not get that same sense of welcoming, and that people were there to train true compassionate physicians like I got at Creighton. So I'm pretty excited that I have that legacy from the school that I trained at. And then I kept my passion for, we'll call it perinatal, moms and babies, and really struggled with, should I be an obstetrician or should I be a pediatrician? Ended up deciding that I was much more interested in the baby after the baby was born than in the mom. And the surgical part of that care. So I trained in pediatrics. And, remember, I was going to go back to Wyoming and be a doctor, but there are no NICUs in Wyoming. There might be one now that does a little bit of low-level NICU care, but really no high-level NICUs at all in the state. And so that was my struggle, is should I practice neonatology because I won't be going home, which was, my overall goal. Or should I do pediatrics and be able to go home and practice in the state where I lived? You can see that I chose neonatology, and it was a phenomenal choice. And I do prioritize getting home to my state and my extended family. And we've made it work to where we feel like we have a really balanced life. My husband, I met at the University of Wyoming as well. He's from Wyoming. And so we're partners in crime in ensuring that we visit our home. But then I did neonatology at the University of Utah. And in neonatology fellowship, it's 3 years, and we have to do 2 years of research during that 3-year time period. And so I was assigned to a lab. Well, I think we got to interview a little bit, but the 2 other people I interviewed with left the university. So it's kind of assigned to a lab, but I got the best mentor, the very best mentor, Kurt Albertine. He was a PhD who studied lung development in sheep, particularly in lambs, and he ran what he called a LICU, lamb ICU. And so the LICU, when I started, was temporarily shut down because of the 2 individuals that had left Utah. And so we designed a project working on baby chick lungs and their development. And so I got to do more of the basic science research that I'd been doing in the Smithsonian lab in Wyoming, but just on the other end of the spectrum of life. So I went from studying aging to studying embryonic development of chick lungs. And that was really fun. And Dr. Albertine was just a passionate mentor as well. And I think what I would say about those first 2 amazing mentors in my life is that above all, they were kind. Neither one of them ever said a bad word or were harsh when something went wrong. And I don't remember that many things going wrong, honestly, because they had such a supportive environment. You could always ask a question and you could always double check. And I wasn't the only student in either of those labs. They were big labs, but you felt seen and you felt like you were contributing. And it was all because they were kind souls who value the individual, and they were passionately in love with science and wanted to help their mentees be passionately in love with science. So that was the craziest long answer to your question, but I'll stop there and see if any of that made sense.
I love it. And kind souls and passionately in love with science. So I think that's an awesome combination that would describe you too, Dr. Anderson Berry. And congratulations on the mentoring award you just got from your graduate students. Well, you got it from University of Nebraska Medical Center. You want to tell a little bit about the award and how your students uh,
Oh, I am
nominated you and what happened and
I am so honored. My students nominated me for the um, Faculty Mentor of Graduate Students Award at UNMC, and their nomination of me was accepted, and that was just a phenomenal honor in and of itself. But I'll tell you a little bit of the backstory, which is that we have our lab meeting every week, and we have a pretty big lab group. And so some of us meet in person in our lab space, and others of us are sometimes on a different campus, either at UNL or at Children's Nebraska or somewhere across the country. And we have one of our faculty is at Colorado State University in Fort Collins. And so there's always a Zoom component and there's always an in-person component, and you never know who's going to be where. And I'll be honest, my schedule's crazy. And so even sometimes I don't know which campus I'm going to be on at the end of the day because it's pretty dynamic. And sometimes I have emergency meetings or need to switch from one campus to the other. And so I didn't think much of it, but my lab and CHRI manager, Dr. Matt Van Ormer, had asked me a couple of times, are you going to be at lab meeting in person or on Zoom this week? And I said, oh yeah, I'm definitely there in person. And so I was walking down the hall from my office to the lab space, and he was standing in the hall. And I was like, why is he standing in the hall? Lab meeting is going to start in 1 minute. Usually he's getting the Zoom ready or setting something up. And he's like, we moved the lab meeting. And so he walked me across campus to this big room, and everybody, even students that aren't actively in the lab right now, was in this room. And it was a big surprise party. And they had gotten me flowers and cake. But the other thing that they got me, that they made me, was this beautiful hand-drawn picture. And they always joke that I wear a lot of hats. What hat do you have on now, Anne? And they'd drawn a whole bunch of different hats and put all my titles: mom, wife, daughter, CHRI, vice president, all of the things that I do. They'd drawn a different hat for each one of those things. And then they had tracked down almost all of the students that I had mentored over the last probably 15 years and had them sign around the edge. And then my student had handmade from walnut from a tree in his backyard, the picture frame. And then they put their letters of nomination in an envelope in the back. And I can hardly think of a more meaningful gift than that in my entire life. I have to say, I have the most talented, kind, enthusiastic, passionate about science students that a mentor could ever ask for. And it's just such an honor to help them out in any small way that I can. So it was a top 10 moment in my life. Definitely. Those connections between a mentor and a mentee are pretty deep.
wow, that is so amazing. And wow, it is so exciting to hear you because when I read about it, I didn't know all of the backstory, and that is so beautiful. Oh my gosh. Well, you mean the world to them, and and vice versa. And it's just so beautiful to see that between mentors and mentees and the relationship. And it sounds like from the way you described your mentors that you're paying it forward and kindness and loving what you do. Those two ingredients.
Absolutely. That is a key that I tell every mentee what you just said, loving what you do. That is the most important part about picking a career, the most important part. If you love what you do, you can make it meaningful and you can usually make a living doing it. But if you don't love what you do, the rest of your life will not be the same. And so if you do what you should do, and whether that should is what society thinks you should do, what a teacher told you you should do, what your parents or grandparents or brother or sister told you or spouse told you should do, it's a recipe for unhappiness. And I've seen that play out, unfortunately. And I also have mentees that sell themselves short before they ever have a need to do so. So a not uncommon situation is a young, usually female, will come up to me and say, I'd just like to talk to you because, I really love, and often it's surgery or intensive care, something that is high intensity. I really love that career, but I want to have a family. So I think I'm going to do family medicine instead. What do you think? And it's just, it always stops me in my tracks because number one, you should always do what you love. And if you aren't in love with something, it will become work and it will become drudgery, and you will start to be better either about the patients or the people you work in with, or the system you work in. And it can be very difficult to have a successful career with that. But number two is that I know lots of surgeons who are moms and have great families. I know lots of intensivists, myself included, who've been very active moms and who have developed a skill set that is valuable enough to their employer that they are allowed to have the flexibility to do what they need to do to be a successful mom and a successful surgeon, intensivist, subspecialist. And so my advice to young people of any gender is follow your passion, train to the highest of your capabilities, make yourself indispensable to a system, an employer, a community, and then you will have the flexibility around the other things in life you want to do, whether that is research, academics, parenting, travel, vacationing, things like that. And so, and especially don't imagine a situation 5, 10, or 15 years in the future that you already have to pull away from well before that even exists. And so that's one piece of advice I find myself giving over and over again. And I see it play out over and over again as well, where people do pull back and then aren't happy and then end up just pulling completely away from medicine, as opposed to those people who step forward into their passion and are incredibly successful and happy and, raise wonderful families. And, everybody struggles. I'm not saying that I haven't struggled or that those people haven't struggled, but when you love what you do, it's easier to put the struggling behind you and focus on the great stuff.
Yes. Such good advice. And your mentors and mentees have sounds like been formal, like as part of a lab. Uh, how would someone become a mentee of yours or find a mentor? Because sometimes it's formal, but other times it can be informal too. And um, 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 so do you have any advice for finding a mentor for
Yeah.
people who are looking for one? Or yeah.
Yeah, I think I have very formal established relationships with my official graduate students or with my summer research students. And then I do a lot of informal mentoring, 1 or 2 or 3, conversations. I mentor a lot of students as they are in transition. And so by that, if they're going from undergraduate to medical school and doing that application, or if they're going from medical school to residency to fellowship. I'll have a series of 2 or 3 conversations and offer, thoughts and guidance on what their applications look like, what their personal statements look like, where they're thinking about applying, what types of jobs are available in different parts of pediatrics or research. And then there's kind of more group mentoring, like I talked about, where I'll speak with groups about different opportunities. So I think the best way to find a mentor as a student is to talk to your professors. And if you remember, like in undergraduate, the first professor I talked to, he didn't become my mentor, but he sent me to the person who did. And so you don't have to expect that the first person you approach is going to be that absolutely magical fit. And maybe they won't send you to the next person, but maybe they'll give you a little bit of advice, or maybe you'll find out that would not have been a good fit. And let's go somewhere else. But I think that just being brave enough to talk to people and also being brave enough to ask the formal question. I'm looking for a mentor for X. Would you have Y time to spend with me in the next 1 week, 1 month, 1 year? Is a really good way to start forming some boundaries about the mentor-mentee relationship. If you have a specific ask, if you have a specific amount of time, and if you have a specific time frame when that would occur, that can be really helpful to the person you're asking for help from or advice from, because a lot of faculty who have a lot of great experience can also be overscheduled, overbooked, and they don't want to enter into something and then not be able to fulfill that obligation, what they said that they would do. And so if you can put some parameters around it, that can be very helpful. And then I think the other component of that from the mentees point of view is that it's really critical to understand that it's not passive to be a mentee. That is an active role. And so you have to come prepared. You have to do your homework about whatever question you're asking, whatever topic you want to talk about. You need to provide the framework for the conversation. The conversation by the mentor then can get bigger or it can get more focused. But if you don't give them a place to start, they're not going to be helpful to you because, you know, they, for me, for instance, I've been a faculty member for 20 years. I'm happy to talk about any slice of the life in that 20 years, but if you don't give me some guidance, I'm going to randomly pick the wrong slice of life for you unless I understand where you're coming from. So those are some of the kind of boundaries. The time when I found it was most difficult to find a mentor was when I was an early career faculty member. We were not in a situation in the Department of Pediatrics where there were a lot of mid-career faculty members. There were a lot of much more mature faculty members who weren't doing a lot of academic pediatrics. They were doing a lot of really great clinical coursework, but I struggled to find a mentor in my early faculty years and went and sought some mentors outside of the institution to start with. And that was also very helpful. So your mentor doesn't have to be at your institution or at your school or in your department or in your division. But they do need to be a good fit and they need to be someone who you can be pretty open with about your situation.
Thank you. And thank you for being such a great role model, Dr. Anderson Berry. You are just so inspiring, and you make me want to be a better mentor and also mentee, because that's great wisdom too, if you're the mentee, to have some specificity and boundaries and know what it is that you're looking for to kind of help you. Well, how can listeners follow you?
I am on X or Twitter at the @ symbol and then A Anderson Berry. So AANDERSONBERRY. I don't have a podcast. I do tweet through at NPQIC on all items perinatal health related. And then a lot of our work in child health research is tweeted at the at UNMC_CHRI Twitter account as well. And then on LinkedIn, I'm A Anderson Berry as well.
Thank you, Dr. Anderson Berry. It's such a joy to talk to you. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
It's just been a pleasure. I hope that I get to talk to you again soon.
Thank you.